Hello, delighted to say I'm joined by former Galway manager Kevin Walsh to talk about the Connacht final, 2-14 to 2-8 to Mayo in the finish. A great first half for Galway, but certainly didn't go their way in the second. So Kevin Walsh of Grow Coach is here with me, which you've developed alongside Brian Silk and Sean Conlon, an online resource for GA coaches and players at all levels with the aim to increase skills and knowledge. And also Kevin has an autobiography out there, a great read, The Invisible Game. And just from our end as well, just a reminder, we're brought to you by orgaretro.com, who do great Mayo jerseys, great Galway jerseys. So go to orgaretro.com and get 15% off with the promo code OurGame. So after all of that, Kevin, how do you try and sum up a game like that? Galway looked so good in the first half, but the wheels seemed to come off after the break.
Yeah, very difficult, Shane. I suppose, Mayo in the past, they get savage oxygen from, having spaces in the middle 3 lanes, and the whole second half, this seemed to be they're coming in droves, and once they got a foothold, it was just very hard to stop it. And in fairness to them, they got massive energy in the second half, and I do think as well that probably the two McLaughlins, them coming in at half time, I found it hard to see how they're off in the first place if they're fit. In particular, Kevin McLaughlin, he's the most underrated player probably in the country. There's loads of Mayo players in the past who get a massive amount of publicity, but for me, he's probably their best player in the past, but never gets mentioned. And for him sitting on the bench, if there's more in him, may have caused a few problems for Mayo in the first half. But I don't see him not starting again. But I suppose look at the game was 4-3 after about 20 minutes, and Mayo went for a long period without scoring, and Galway really, with the goal off the post, it wouldn't be like Mayo in the past not to be alert to that type of thing. And in fairness to Shane Walsh, he stepped up and put it away brilliantly. But the Mayo teams in the past wouldn't be allowing that to happen, and I suppose that gave us the oxygen, something we couldn't build on in the second half. And I think, Matthew Tierney probably missed a point at the very start of the second half, and it went straight down, and Mayo got a penalty. So all these swings, I suppose, made life very difficult in the second half.
And did you think the penalty was a penalty? Well, sorry, more so it was a penalty, I felt, but by the time he was fouled, it seemed he was bottled up. So it seemed a bit of a silly tackle from Matthew Tierney.
Yeah, look at it, he probably wasn't going to get a shot off. There was 3 or 4 bodies in there, and maybe a late hand on the back. It wasn't a massive push or anything, but it probably was a penalty, But I suppose, when you look back on it, there's probably loads of time in the second half where Mayo actually sold the ball through a group of 4 or 5 players, and that's not just good enough. There's a thing what we always call in the Grow Coach, we call help defense, and there's loads of bodies around there, and even Matthew Rand's goal to waltz through there with 4 or 5 bodies, probably isn't good enough defending to allow to win a game. And I suppose Mayo weren't putting that pressure on the first half, got the oxygen, like I said, from the 2 McLaughlins coming in, and then they just started to come in droves, and the middle was completely open. Our big players then seemed to be tired as well. Paul Conroy's second half, he was superb in the first half, but I think was dispossessed 3 or 4 times in the second half. Dylan McHugh coming forward was dispossessed. There was just too many dispossessions in 1v1, and it allowed Mayo attack the counter.
Yeah, because maybe Conroy seemed to move inside after being brilliant in further out the field in the first half. Oisin McConville talked about maybe the conditioning of the Mayo players is somewhat ahead of the Galway players. I mean, maybe you'd have a different opinion on that. Like, is there a tactical issue there? Is there a depth and panel issue? Is there any easy way to sum it up? Or do you look at some of the shots that Galway took and say, Tierney had a poor enough wide at the start of the second half, Comer dropped one short, Johnny Heaney fisted one wide, a 45 wide from Tierney, and if you got any of those scores, maybe that would have stemmed the flow a little.
Yeah, look, we all know 1 or 2 scores just keeps momentum slightly with you. But, those were 2 or 3 things that certainly, but you'd have to wonder was the tiredness going on at that point, because, as you said, it looks like the legs were kind of gone through the middle and stuff. But, I suppose what was worrying towards the end would be, I think, what do you call the sub to come on there, put the ball over the bar, and you'd be thinking if you're shouting for a place, you'd be trying to nail that. Don't know who got another goal, or whether it was a nudge or whatever it is, but those things could have led to 3 or 4 goals, and after having a brilliant first half display, I suppose the big thing of the second half was to have your first 10 minutes at least in the second half and have it, it's well set up that they don't come down to the centre, and that's where Mayo gets the oxygen in our time. We'd always push them out in the lane 1, lane 5, but giving them lane 2, 3 and 4 and having all the defenders back, I suppose the help defense for each other wasn't really brilliant. It was kind of, if you've got too many people back at times and you don't know what you're doing, sometimes someone will leave a job to the next fella beside him, and all of a sudden they've waltzed through. So I suppose, look, there's massive learnings there. A lot of young players from Galway there, so that's their first day in Croke Park at senior level. So they're going to learn a lot from that. You know, ideally, I suppose, you know, you'd like to have more of the older bodies there come up to Croke Park against, you know, your Aidan Varley, your Ian Burke, your Declan Kine, your Anton Lee, you know, your Finter Curry, fellas like that would be around the panel. Might just have made it a bit stronger for maybe, I suppose, a bit of a slower transition for a smaller number rather than, you know, having too many in at one time. But look, that's what it is. That's where it's at. Some people don't want to commit, but that's why it's really important, I think, to stay up with the bigger teams to make sure that everybody stays with you, because full panel is needed.
Yeah. So, like, would you have done anything differently if you were Pádraig, Joyce? I know it's probably difficult, like former teammate of yours, but like, is there anything like you're as a manager, you know, that's like you're on the sideline, you're watching on, you're thinking, how can you affect this game? I mean, did you feel that there's anything that Galway left behind them here?
Look, it's very difficult, Shane, and it happens to nearly every team in the country. I'd say apart from the Dubs in the last 6 years, there's going to be times where no matter what you do as a manager, players just, you know, at some point just either have a bit of enough number of minutes, or a mindset kicks in, and there's not a whole pile you can do about it. And you'd have, you know, a lot of the players were very good in the first half there, just weren't there in the second half, or whether it's fatigue or, you know, obviously Mayo bringing changes in and some of the better players back on would have made a difference. But, you know, I suppose the only thing, and maybe there's reasons for it, but I suppose putting Paul Conway into full forward so early, I'm not so sure, you know, did that work? Having Damien Comer running out on the middle, which I suppose Damien is a fast burst type of player all the time. He's, you know, it doesn't suit his makeup to be tracking or continuously running. So, you know, I don't know, and maybe Paul needed a break as well after a massive first half. But I suppose that's the only thing looking on was, you know, do we really need to make those changes at that point? And maybe we did. You don't know what was on with different players at different times. But then once Mayo, I said, got the foothold, as I speak about the lanes in the areas of where to keep Mayo away from. And just almost invited there in the second half. And, you know, I think anyone watching Mayo over the last number of years should probably see that. And again, you know, it's fine getting bodies back, but you have to have the skill set to be a good tackler and at least know when you have to move into your teammate as well.
Yeah, and just to come back to your grow coach work and that type of stuff, and to the lay person, when you're talking about these different lanes and stuff, could you sort of give a very brief overview of what you mean and, you know, how it manifested itself today?
Look, I suppose any management or any group you need to break down your pitch into sections, just to, you know, if you're given roles to certain players, that they know what sections are in the pitch and what they've got to do. So we would always like to either go on 6 lanes or 5 lanes, and we'd always break the pitch down, I suppose, mainly into 5 lanes, and lane 1 being the outside and lane 5 being the outside. And if you're attacking, you fill those 5 lanes, but if you're defending, you know, you need to learn how to defend 3 lanes very strongly. And
so they're the flanks we're talking about.
Yeah, so you've been trying to leave the flanks 1 and 5. You know, even if they want to kick some brilliant ball in there from 60 yards, it's a great ball, and they win it on the sideline. But you get your team to squash over in that area and take those 3 lanes, and all of a sudden they're now in a worse position, even though they're closest towards goal. But what you can't do is stay spread out and let the Mayo guys come down the centre, because they'll kill you with bodies going forward. That's been their mark for the last 7 or 8 years. You know, and any team, you know, any of those young guys are going to come in at the minute. There's only a few of them coming in at a time, so that's the game they're going to play. So, you know, anyone's going to play against Mayo in the next while, you know, if Shay goes to forward, you double team straight away. If they're coming with bodies from outside, you take like lanes. If they're in a shaded field, you know, and there's things like that that we just need to maybe soften the cough of those little guys when they get the gander up the very hard.
Do you see much difference in how Pádraig Joyce has set up the team versus how you were setting it up previously? I know I ghost wrote a column for him a couple of times, and he talked about leaving maybe 4 up. So I don't know if you can do that in the real world, like Dublin often play with everyone back.
Sorry. Your line
there's a small little bit of a break there. Yeah, sorry, I'm not sure if you can hear me now. Okay, it's breaking up a little on my end too. Could you drop off? Maybe if you drop off the call and drop back on again.
Sorry.
And I'll just I could just get you to drop off the call for a second and drop back on. Yeah. So just a reminder there, while Kevin is dropping on and off, that his autobiography, The Invisible Game, is out now, and it's a real insight into coaching. Also, We're brought to you by orgaretro.com, and if you want to get 15% off maybe this Galway jersey, Mayo, and maybe this Mayo jersey, go to orgaretro.com and put in the promo code OurGame. So we'll just wait a couple of seconds for Kevin Walsh to come back in there and ask him a little bit more about the Mayo performance. Mayo are through to a 10th All-Ireland semi-final in 11 years after a 2-14-2-8 win over Galway at Croke Park. Maybe Croke Park was a factor. Half-time row, maybe that stood to Mayo also. Kevin is just coming back here now, so hopefully now this will work okay. Kevin, hopefully you can hear us a little bit better this time.
Sorry, Shane, I'll get you up here again.
Yeah, I think that might be okay now. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I have you now, Shane, yeah.
Okay, lovely. Well, one of the questions I was going to ask you about was, do you think Pádraig Joyce has changed the setup of the team all that much? I did a ghost of a column for him maybe 3 years ago, and he was talking about how maybe he'd like to play with 4 up front. Now, I don't know if that's pragmatic, because you look at Dublin, they've 15 inside their own 65 plenty of the time. So, but do you think he has changed much from what you had?
Look, I'm sure there's subtle changes in there. There was definitely a big attempt to change it, I'd say, in the past 2 years. But from what I can see at the minute, like even the very last play there, Shane Walsh was the last man back, marking in his own square. So, that was, and it was a missed goal opportunity for Mayo on the 67th minute. So, like, I suppose they have tried to a certain degree, and not that you've always got to bring your own mark there, but I think the few times they've tried it, there have been hockings given out and opened up. So I think the best teams are always putting men behind the ball, and there's no, you can go and look at all you like. And look, it does take time you might learn a lesson or two along the way. But from what I can see, it's Galway, like anybody else, they want to win, and I'd say there might be 1-2 maximum left to the field. And I think that's the way Pádraig has been for the last number of games, I suppose, after maybe trying a few other things that didn't work out.
Do you feel that the row at half time in the tunnel, I mean, Mayo were so asleep in the first half in some ways, Galway were very, very good. Did that work against Galway in any way, shape or form? Does it make a difference?
It shouldn't, Shane. I mean, look, there's always bits and pieces of rows going out on the pitch, off the ball and stuff. That shouldn't be an issue. It shouldn't be an issue. It should be, I suppose, it's about doing the best things you can keep doing. I mean, if you go in at half time, you just really deal on what, like we do in the Croke Coach side of things, what are the 2 things we haven't started to do well yet? What's the 2 things we should continue to do that we're doing well? And what's the 2 things, whatever it might be, it could be for individuals. What's the KPIs for them? So either way, the messages are very simple at halftime. It should be what's working, what's not working, and what should we start to try and make work. And the row, it's only a bit of a handbag, so that shouldn't have any impact. Just
breaking up a small bit again now. Hopefully that picks up again. But a final question, I suppose, with the line breaking up. I hope you can hear me there. But I'm just wondering, do you think Mayo can actually go on again this year and finally win that All Ireland?
Sorry, Shane, again. You can go again.
Yeah, well, I'm just wondering, Mayo are now in their 10th All Ireland semi-final in 11 years. Do you think they can finally take that step on? They're in a crash course with Dublin in an All Ireland semi-final. But do you think they can go on and finally do it?
Well, I think they're definitely, Dublin aren't where they were. I think they're far more vulnerable. You take out your Paul Mannion, you take out your McCaffreys, and a few other guys are gone, and you see Billy McMahon come back in again. And they haven't been shooting the lights out. Now, we all know Croke Park is a different situation because it's worth so many points to Dublin, and I stand by that. I've said it in the book, I'm saying it again. Even last week with Meath, why wasn't that in Navan? And would we have a different result last week? If it was, maybe we would, maybe we wouldn't. But I'd love to see that bit of fairness kicking in, that that your home venue isn't used. Having said all that, I don't think Dublin are going as well as they were, but I also don't think, even at today's performance, that Mayo or near where they were 3 years ago either. I just think the likes of Barrett, the likes of Boyle, Seamus O'Shea in the middle, the 2 O'Connors, Jim's only back now, Andy Moran, them are all massive players to time and place in a short period of time. But Mayo have gone a long way towards that. But I don't think that, as we saw in the first half, I don't think they're actually there yet. I think it's going to take quite a while, albeit Dublin are coming back.
Okay, well, look, thanks very much, Kevin, for joining us, and I'm sure we'll have another chat very soon. And people, don't forget, you can catch his autobiography. It's out now, The Invisible Game. And don't forget to follow Croke Coach on social media there. Thank you very much, Kevin.
Thank you, Jim.